In this episode of the Toolbox, we'll explore one of the latest regressions that's a trend in the world of web development. Thankfully, it's not the return of table layout. I'm talking about the return of the backend. And yes, it's coming back with a vengeance. The pace of the web is relentless, and that's why you need the Toolbox. All right. Hello, everyone. This is reimagined, and I stream about front-end and full-stack tools Wednesdays at 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific. Follow me and subscribe on all the social media things for more content. If you want to watch any past episodes, make sure you take a look at my blog at rabo.org. One of the things that's really surprised me recently is how a lot of new frameworks out there are trying to revisit the backend. And that's what we're going to explore later on today. Now, before we do that, I want to take a look at the chat. My friend Dawana, who is normally here, is off this week. So if you have any questions, just let me know and I'll pause every so often to answer them. I'd love to learn about any new tools or the stack that you're currently working on. I'm always exploring new things, and anything that you let me know about might be something that I get to cover later on. So I see a couple of people in the chat, but I don't see any questions just yet or any comments, so that's great. So let's take a look at what I call the shorts. And it's really just interesting things that I find on the web this week. And the web, as usual, has been pretty busy. So first off, let's go ahead and switch to the side-by-side view, which I turn around this week because last week I noticed that when I'm looking at this screen that has like my preview, I'm looking kind of away from it looks like I'm looking away from the screen. So I moved it around to the right-hand side. Hopefully it'll work out. So this is my website, and this is where you can go to find the latest episodes. I don't have today's episode just yet on the website, but if I mention any links and you can't find them later on, the episode will be on and it will have all the links in there for you to follow. So don't worry if you don't catch something, just go to rabo.org and you can find everything there. All right, so the first thing that I thought was super important this week was the fact that GitHub launched this new feature called sponsors only repositories. So this is sort of GitHub's answer to Patreon. I think the whole web has been sort of stressed about the fact that a lot of people that do open source work are not getting paid. And so they've been kind of working on trying to solve that problem for a while. And one of the ways that they have done this is by allowing repositories that are only available to your sponsors. So I went through the setup procedure. I don't think that I have any kind of sponsors only repositories, but it's pretty much like Patreon. Like you log in and you can set up different award amounts. You can, set up different sponsorship sort of levels for people, suggested, like repeatable monthly or, repeatable like one-time donations and lots of other things that you can do in there. And now you can have a repository associated with the donations. In addition to that, recently they had launched this other feature called discussions. And I was wondering why they played that up so well, but I think it's part of their bigger plan to make something like that available to a sponsors only repo. So if you want to talk to the people that sponsor you, you can now create a repository. That repository can have a discussion board where people can interact. It's pretty much like how issues work, but it's kind of its own thing and it's attached to a specific repository. So that's a pretty interesting move. I don't think they're trying to replace Patreon, but surely there's something broken with the way that people sort of get paid on the web. So I think this is kind of an attempt to sort of fix that. I personally think, here's what I think GitHub should do. And I don't know if anybody's listening from GitHub, but the problem with a lot of Patreons and sponsors is that a lot of people will ask like $5 for this or $10 for this. And, if you maybe have a huge salary, that's something that you can possibly afford. But I feel like I want to support more repositories that I'm actually using. So why not sort of let me have a budgeted amount? So I'm a pro member at GitHub. and I would love to have like, say, $20 or $40 a month that I would like to contribute to open source projects. But then I want GitHub to sort of analyze what I'm actually using in my repositories and then kind of like pay people accordingly. So the ability to sort of analyze what you're actually using and then sort of pay people according to that, I think would be really cool. And then in addition to that, you could still sort of maybe submit some sort of way of supporting maybe earlier projects or projects that don't have a lot of support, or perhaps, minorities, things like that. I think a way of not asking me for, a lot of money in different places, but have a centralized place. And I don't think anybody's doing this, and I feel like it's a good idea. I don't know what people think, but I think that would solve a lot of the problems if all of a sudden they had like this pool of money from everybody that is using GitHub and have that money available to be sent to the projects based on usage. I think would really kind of solve this problem for me, but that's just my opinion, and hopefully maybe somebody will listen to that, because I think it's a fantastic idea and that it would really work. And then, giving people the ability to do other things if they want to sort of restructure the way that they give accordingly. Anyways, I think this is something that is pretty cool. So you can see some samples of how it works in here. They have welcome messages. Also, GitHub will manage all the transactions in the backend, so that's pretty cool. It's super easy to set up, and once I think they ask you to get a Stripe account. Once you set everything up, it's pretty sort of easy to do. I think like maybe they could do some more things around newsletters that would help people, be able to send something to their users and build up sort of a level of subscribers. That's another huge thing for people that create open source projects that have sponsors, that a way to communicate with them besides the discussion. I think the discussion is cool for online, but I think some sort of email way would be pretty huge. And then maybe more communication sort of things, like schedule perhaps some sort of chat. Like I get a feeling that a lot of that is going to be coming. So another huge announcement this week was that the Fetch API is now going to be available in Node.js Core. So the Fetch API is this really awesome promise-based API that appeared in JavaScript. So in the old days, we used to use Ajax in order to retrieve data from a server without having to reload an entire page. So now that had been added to JavaScript for a long time. But Node.js actually required a separate module in order to use that functionality. So they are now adding that into the core Node API. And I know that some of these frameworks that I'm talking about today have to use those sort of modules whenever they have to do fetch, because the interesting thing about the sort of move to the backend is that a lot of projects have to retrieve data in some sort of manner. So the way that they would do that is perhaps, depending on the type of project, using not the Fetch API, but one of the modules that does that in Node.js. So oh, great. Somebody just wrote something funny on the network. Thank you, Michael. That made me laugh. All right, so Fetch API provides you can read all about it here. It's not out there yet, so you do have to run node experimental fetch, and then you can use the fetch global without any modules when you are working with files. So I thought that was pretty cool and something that you might be interested in. Also, a move in the industry to require two-factor authentication, especially for a lot of Node packages are getting hit by hackers, and so this is a way of trying to encourage more people to turn on two-factor authentication. It's something that's required for my company when I'm using GitHub. So it's not a huge deal. It does require a little bit more work. When I, for example, something that uses this is GitHub. When I go to GitHub, sometimes I have to pull up an authenticator app and log in, but it's no big deal because honestly, almost everything that I have uses two-factor authentication, and it's really something great. And they're trying to sort of avoid a lot of hackers getting into some of the big projects that people use all the time. Again, they don't have paid supporters. So this is part of the same problem, I think. So it's going to be interesting that they are now requiring the top maintainers to have 2FA. And I imagine that that is maybe going to grow in the future. So if you haven't done it, just do yourself a favor and turn that feature on GitHub, as well as if you're producing any NPM packages. Like if you're doing any NPM packages, I don't see why you would not be doing it at any rate, but it's something that honestly you should just be doing everywhere. So let's see. So a couple of tools that I found this week: the CSS grid generator. In the sort of demo that I'm going to be doing about Remakes today, I found out that one of the tools that I was using called Pico CSS, which I demoed on the last episode, which gives you sort of a set of styles that require very minimal classes, almost like no classes. So, like for a nav, you just use the nav tag with a bunch of list items and then some anchor tags. Makes a lot more sense, but it is missing a two-dimensional grid system. It has like a one-dimensional sort of horizontal grid system in it. So one of the things that they recommend is either merge Bootstrap grid, which seems extreme, or you can use, CSS grid, which is pretty cool. So this website gives you a way of just creating the grids by using an interface, which I really like. Is, I don't know, I find sometimes the grid generators things, I haven't gotten used to creating like the these different frames. So when you click on this, you can get the code, copy it to the clipboard, and you're all done. And it lets you have sort of everything you need for grid right away. So I liked it. So that's a tool that I'm going to be keeping around. It's by Sarah Ito, another genius of the web. So another thing that I use all the time now, this is my preferred icon package. This is Bootstrap icons. And I think it started out at like 500 icons when it came out. It's up to like 1,600 icons now. I'm finding it harder and harder to not find some sort of icon that I, sometimes like you go to an icon library and it's hard to find the icon that you're looking for. But I'm finding it harder and harder because it's just growing by leaps and bounds. Like every 4 weeks or so, they'll release like another bunch of icons. So now they released 140 new icons. I'm not sure what the icons are. So actually a lot of Valentine icons, some file icons, and then some other sort of utility feature icons. So that's sort of cool. I love this framework, super easy to use, especially if you're using Bootstrap. It's super simple. So it's my go-to library right now whenever I have to use icons. So let's see. Another thing that I loved is I love this YouTube Lite from, let's see, this is this YouTube Lite web component that allows you to have videos on your site without having to copy. Like when you share a video from YouTube, you hit this share button and then you copy a ton of code, and it's like this very complicated embed with a ton of like tracking info and all that kind of stuff. This web component allows you to just simply use a Lite YouTube sort of tag, and then you just send the Lite YouTube the video ID, and that's all you need to do this. So this is as simple as it gets. And I don't know what YouTube is doing with all of their code, but whenever you put a video on a website, it loads super slow. When you use this, it loads like almost immediately. So it must be tracking you in 500,000 different ways, and this is maybe a way around that. So lazy loading, which is cool. This is a copy of another package that I saw a long time ago, but the sort of new thing about this one is that it uses web components. So maybe it's a little bit easier to work with. And so this is a clone of something else that I really enjoyed, but with the web components, it just makes it as easy as, a HTML tag, which makes it a little bit more standard. So check it out. I love that one. So let's see. Also, I found this really cool YouTube video. Again, I'll have links on rabo.org. Okay, hold on. What happened to this video?
When React first launched, it was...
Oh yeah, this is the history of React. And so it kind of goes through step by step through why React is the way that it is and how people really disliked it when it first came out. And to this day, like, I'm not a really huge fan of JSX, but you kind of get used to it. And I think there's supposed to be like a JSX2, which is supposed to be a lot better. So, but this is a really good sort of documentary style 10-minute video on the history of React that I think you'll find super cool. So when you get a chance, maybe, and you have some like downtime, it's a good documentary to check out. So let me take a look at the what do you call it? The chat to see if there's anybody putting stuff in. Looks like we have quite a few people in watching. So let's see. We have somewhere I lost my ability to look at the things that people are putting in. So let's see if I can find it really quick. Let's see, camera overlays, and looks like I can see the comments on the web, but I'm losing the ability, and for some reason this thing just went off. That's weird. Let's make sure. Okay, there we are. Okay, so let me not touch the chat right now. So it looks like I have, wow, somebody said that they use something called Adonis.js. I never heard of that one. That's maybe an interesting one to go find some information about. I don't know if anybody uses that. And then Node.js versus Java. They're so completely different things. Java is just a completely different language. So let's see the back. Let's try it. And then we just have a bunch of other cool comments. So, all right, let me keep on going. So as I mentioned, the backend is something that was really huge a while back, so much more so than today. Today, we kind of use something like React, which is essentially an interface kind of library. And then we do things related to data by combining React with something else. So, you know, you can use something like Firebase, or you can use something like, you know, some sort of SQL database, but that connection to the back end is a little bit uncoupled. And we normally have something on the front end that essentially calls something on the back end. A while back, we sort of started to think about how we might be able to use something like, you know, functions that ran on the server while the rest of the site was what we call serverless, which means rendering all the pages without, you know, sort of having to have any, you know, rendering the pages without having to be connected to a server. So in the old days with PHP, everything used to be on the server. You queried the database and you sort of output the result of the query, and that's how you build pretty much all websites. And so, but eventually that became really cumbersome. Nowadays, you're seeing a lot of newer frameworks take a look at how they can utilize the best features of serverless, which is pre-rendering a lot of data, but then still providing ways of connecting to the backend. That is actually a really powerful sort of structure, because it helps you, you know, be able to do things that you haven't been able to do. It sort of creates a web standards sort of structure for your websites that I think is pretty cool. And some of the frameworks that have come out heavily in support of this have been things like let's see. So for some reason, okay. This framework from Shopify called Hydrogen. So this framework is really for, you know, shopping channels or some sort of shopping website. It's really well structured. I like a lot of the things that they are trying to do, but it's essentially a React-based framework. A lot of these frameworks kind of use React, and it just has a big sort of component on the back end, because you're essentially talking to Shopify servers in order to get data about your products. So that's one of the big ones. The other, actually the hugest one, is called Next.js. You know, for some reason, and I'm not sure why, I have not had a lot of experience with Next.js, we're going to be talking about, a framework today that is pretty similar. So if you have used Next.js, I'm curious to know what you think of what I'm using versus Next.js. I really do want to try out Next.js in the future to see maybe the differences, and also just to give it a shot. I don't spend all my time in React. I do pretty much all the new frameworks. So, but this is actually the biggest one, and it does provide sort of a connection to the backend from the front end. That led to, of course, Vue.js created their own version of it called Next. And I'm curious because the version 3 is in beta, and they kind of do the same thing. They have some features that allow you to sort of render things by using the framework that, the main framework, which would be React or Vue in this case, and then have some things that are in the backend. So I'm going to play a video of a demo that I did of me using this new framework, and we'll catch on at the end and see what you think. Remakes is a new framework that uses the power of the backend and almost magic routing to help you build your apps using React. One of the coolest features in this platform is nested routes. Instead of loading different parts of the page dynamically, like in a single page app, it fetches and caches parts of the page on the server, and then it sends it fully formed onto the client. Let's go ahead and install it using npx create remix at latest. I'll call mine Remix Play. Notice that it's assuming that you're going to want to run this on a server, which isn't always the first step on most apps. We'll pick the default, the Remix app server, but you can also use other servers. I prefer vanilla JavaScript, but be mindful that the documentation assumes that you'll be working in TypeScript. And I'll just say that I do want it to run the npm install command. Let's open this up in Visual Studio Code and take a look at what we get. Let's take a look first at remakes.config.js. This has some basic defaults for how things are built and which directories Remix is going to use. On the package.json file, you can see the different commands you can run. And if you look at the dependencies, you'll notice that, of course, this requires React and also Remix. There's also a config file for JavaScript, which spells out different configuration variables for React. Other than the config files, there are two main folders. The public folder is for files that you want published along with your project. So you could put images here or anything else you want to be available within the app. The app folder is where we do most of our work. In here, there are two special entry points for your app. The entry client is the JavaScript that will load into the browser. The server entry point is what runs on your server. You probably won't need to touch these two files. Next is the root file, which is what creates your page code. We're importing a bunch of modules here at the top, and then we're exporting a couple of things. Notice how we're exporting a meta object here. This lets us create meta tags in our documents. Here we're creating one for the title of our page. If you look at the root file, you'll notice something that looks like an HTML page, and it is using a lot of the components that we imported. Here's the component for the meta tag, which right now has the title that we created right here. This alloc component is where your application will go, and the scroll restoration is to manage updates to the page. Finally, this live reload component is to manage live reloading during development. You can see that there is a links component if we want to import any CSS, as well as a scripts component. This is where you would add any additional scripts that you want to load on your final page. Let's go ahead and run the development command. When you do that, the Remix app server starts. Notice that we added a cache folder, and that now there is a build folder in our public folder. Let's see how we can add some styles to our project. In the routes folder, in the index.jsx file, you can see that there are some basic styles added here in the React format. Let's go ahead and get rid of those. You can see the live reload server updates the preview right away. We can go back into the root.jsx file, and in the same way that we're adding a meta function right here to add a title, we can go ahead and add links. Here we can return an array of links. So we'll return a link with a relation of style sheet. And here we could refer to a URL from a CDN, or we can refer to a local file. I'm going to refer to an object, and I'll go ahead and import this from a file. Let's go ahead and add that to the app folder. And we'll try adding a simple style. You can also add an external style sheet. Let's go ahead and add Pico CSS. After we install the library, we can import the styles from the node modules folder and add it to our links array. We'll go ahead and wrap this outlet with a container so that it looks a little bit nicer. Now this is a pretty basic style sheet, so you can still go ahead and add inline styles. Or you can add things to your shared CSS file. Let's go ahead and change the color of the primary variable in Pico CSS. And we'll make some changes to all the H tags. I'll also add some styles that will affect the main content on my homepage. Our index route has all this content for the page. We're going to get rid of most of this and add some basic content. Let's say that we wanted to add another page into our website. We can do that by creating another route. I'm going to create a new file called cast.jsx. I'll create a new React component. I'm going to call it cast. Now I can go to that route's URL. Let's go ahead and change this a little bit. Now here's where Remakes can get a little interesting. You can create routes that are nested inside other routes. To do that, we're going to need to make a folder. I'm going to call this cast. And in that folder, I'm going to put an index file. I'll give it a name of cast index route right now. And I'll go ahead and place a paragraph with some lorem ipsum text. Now, I want to put this inside my cast route right here. What I'll need to do is use the outlet method that I saw on this root route. And here we're importing outlet, and that allows us to create a component that is going to be displaying the content for our page. I'll go into my cast.jsx and I'll import the outlet. Now I can use that outlet component somewhere on my page. You can also create a dynamic route that receives information. I'm going to create another file right here under cast, and I'll start it with a $, and I'll call it cast ID. This special route is going to be able to receive data from the URL. To do this, we'll need an import, and we'll get something called use params from Remakes. Once we have that, we'll create a function called cast member, and in here we'll create a variable to hold our parameters. I will simply output that variable from params into our div. The variable is named cast ID because that's the name of our file. Now we can go to that URL and just add a number to our cast. We'll need to make sure that this is on curly braces, of course. Let's take a look at another one of the interesting features of Remakes, how you can import data using the server. To do that, let's go back into this index right here. We're going to import something called use loader data. And we're also going to use the link component. This loader will allow us to get data. And the interesting thing here is that we're getting it from the server. This is not a client-side call at all. We'll use an async function using our loader to fetch some data from a server. Now I've added this onto one of my own servers, but this could be a call to a database. Once we have that, we can use this to export, and we'll create a variable to hold the data that we receive from the server. Now it's just a matter of displaying that data. We'll take our data and then we will map it into a variable. We'll need to have a key. Thankfully, my data has an item called a cast ID. Now we can create some code to display our headers. And I've added some images into an images folder so that I can see these images. There's also a property called the slug of each cast, which has the prefix for all my images. The thumbnails have an _tn and they have an SVG extension. We'll output the bio as well, and then we'll do a footer. And we'll create a link to the different cast members. We're using the link component to go to a URL with the cast ID. And then we'll add a button here that says read more. Let's go back to the main cast page. Looks like I made a couple of typos. This needs to be actually use loader data, not use loader data. And also need to export this function as the default method. You can see all the different aliens right here. And if we click on each one of these items, you'll see that it goes to the proper page. Let's go ahead and build that next. Let's go back into the cast ID page. And in addition to params, we're going to use loader data as well. Now I'm just going to copy the function from this other index page. On a real project, we may query the database directly right here and ask only for the data that we need. We'll go ahead and create a variable here for our data. And then in the return statement, we'll just build out our display. Now here we're going to need to filter things. We'll use the JavaScript find method to go through the items and then find an item where the ID we got from the parameters is the same as the ID of the current item. Now we can use that here. And it wouldn't be a real web project without some typos. So it looks like it's telling me that I can't find module build, which I'm not sure why I put that in there. And this should, of course, be use loader data. So if we save that, we can try to refresh. And now it's telling you that it can find something called cast member. Okay, so that's not good. So cast member. And let's check it out now. Looks like it's mostly okay except for the image. And that's because I forgot to put a period right here. So let's check it out. And now we get all of the data. So we can hit the back button here and go to any one of these and get all the information. There's a lot more that we can do with Remix, but this shows you the basics. You essentially have the ability now to talk to a server and do things before you send things to the client, which is super powerful and a little retro. Yeah, I thought that the way that it worked was pretty awesome. After I got sort of used to it, what's really amazing, and I know that it went really fast because I try to make my edits about less than 10 minutes or so. The thing that's pretty awesome is this little async function right here. I don't know if you sort of, just in case you missed it, this is a function that runs on the server. There's two pieces to this framework. There's a piece that runs on the server and a piece that runs on the client. So when you are running some scripts, you can actually ask the server, just like you used to in, when dinosaurs ruled the earth, you can say, hey, go to this database and query some data and then send that data back to the client. So you can have the server do that and then feed somebody a page. The nice thing is that with modern caching and CDNs, you're going to get a lot of that data prefetched and pre-rendered. So it's kind of the best of both worlds. You can have data that is fetched and available at the closest location to you. So it's not the same as, when I used to do triple left joins in MySQL and PHP years ago. It's really a modern way of handling a lot of this. So pretty awesome stuff. And I know that this doesn't do it justice because I'm just fetching something from a URL, but it gives you a little bit of a hint of what would happen. So here you could make your entire call to the server, and all of this happens in the background in super fast, cloud servers, stuff that we haven't had until just about now. And there's a lot of other cool things in the way that you work with forms and submit things. It feels like a little bit retro because you're doing things in the way that you used to do them before. So you actually end up posting data to the server. The server manages that data, but it's all available here at the, in your interface where you're creating things. And also this sort of way of creating the cast sort of list and then having this outlet sort of component that will display the items. So when you go to the cast here, it's showing you all of the different items, and those items are being fetched and then displayed underneath this route. So it's going to the cast route and then looking in this cast folder for an index file. And then once you click on each one of these items, then it goes to the individual, it goes to this page fetching the data. And I think here I would actually just get the data. I wouldn't have to do this find method if I was working on a more finished project. So pretty cool stuff. Let me check out the sort of chat for some questions. But I really enjoyed working with this, and I feel like that's the way that a lot of things are going to go on. Face it, there's no such thing as serverless. Some server always had to run something, and we went through loops trying to figure out how to have dynamic pages that weren't all pre-rendered. Because it's fine if you're using like a blog where you just, like rabo.org, it's all flat files. But if I have to make calls to a server for dynamic features, that's something that is always done by a server, even in quote unquote serverless websites. So let's see. So yeah, I found the place to add things to the server. So Gilberto, I never heard of Adonis.js, so I'm gonna have to take a look at that. Interesting, always looking for new thing. Generic LinkedIn users, Node.js versus Java. I'm not sure what that means. Hello, Orhan from Istanbul. That's awesome. Good to see that we have people from everywhere. And hello, Chandana. Super cool. I'm not going to put Michael Johnson's comment because I might get in trouble here. Let's see. It's not really that bad of a comment, but there's people. Sometimes people monitor these things. So, all right. So, hello everyone. Hi everyone. And let's see. Tomas, yeah, light YouTube's pretty awesome. I even like the regular version of it, but having it be a web component, pretty cool. So definitely take a look at it. It loads, if you go to rabo.org, if you watch any of the videos on that channel, I use that everywhere, and it is shocking how much faster your videos load. I have no idea what YouTube is doing in the back end. It's doing a lot, because you can, it just takes a lot of time, especially if you're loading a lot of videos. So that's definitely something you should check out. So Tomas, thanks for the note. So, okay, he says here, you mean you're not a fan of React? I didn't say I wasn't a fan of React. I'm just not a fan of JSX. It always feels kind of annoying. I've always said that my favorite framework happens to be Vue.js. I don't know, a dig Svelte. I like let's see. I like other frameworks. I mean, this one was pretty cool. It's hard for me to sort of decide now because I've been hitting almost like at least a framework every month, if not more than one every month. Sometimes there's CSS frameworks. It's just every time I have a show, I try to show you something new. So I've been hitting a lot of them, and my brain is sort of overwhelmed. I think Alpine was pretty awesome. I've seen a lot of other ones. I am going to try to hit Shopify, but I feel like I have to have like some products in order to, to properly show you something like Shopify. So all I have is this shirt that I wear. I designed it on, I can't remember, Redbubble or one of those sites, and then it's on the website. It's the only product that I have. So I feel like before I do Shopify's Hydrogen, I'd have to have like more stuff to put in there. So that's definitely but it's definitely something that I want to hit. Definitely want to go through and do Next.js and other things that I've heard about. Astro I did a while back. I think somebody asked where you can find the past episodes. The best place is just to go to my website, which is rabo.org. You can also go to my YouTube channel, which has, there's a playlist called, the Toolbox. And for that, you can go to just YouTube /Planet of the Web. That's the best place to get that. So, yeah, so there is Abhimanyu saying, and sorry about the pronunciation. Yeah, the best way is just to go to rabo.org or just go to my YouTube channel. It's really hard, unfortunately, to find things on LinkedIn. Hopefully that's something that they'll be working in, because it's just hard to find like all the past episodes of this show that I try to do pretty often. So I'm not sure what this comment means. Vom read. So, and wow, Dubai, very cool. And hello, Matthew. Hello. Hold on. It says, oh, okay. Adeni Matthew. So hello, Matthew from Nigeria. Hello, Matthew. Okay. So remake sounds good, but I need more time to test and study it, because for mortals like me, we need more time to process it. But it looks, yeah, I figure this is why I'm doing this toolbox, to kind of show you things that are interesting. And I try to give you, I know that I was really struggling with a remix because it's so deep that for me to show you like a whole demo of it, I'd have to spend a lot more time. And I'm really trying to make these things like 10 minutes. And I know that I need to go back and slow down the edit a little bit. So a lot of times I release like sort of re-edited versions of the demos later on. So when I do that, I'm going to take a little bit more time, perhaps build a little bit more navigation in it, and show you a little bit of a more finished version of the project, because I think that was actually edited a little bit too tightly. So, but yeah, I really enjoyed it. Let's see, would I switch to it? I would say maybe not yet, because I haven't explored all the other options, but that's just me because I'm trying everything. But it's really intriguing. I think that we are all going to end up using some sort of technology that has a backend component, whether it's something like Next or Nuxt or Astro combined with something else. I think that the days of sort of the serverless flat file, projects are going to be over. Interestingly enough, this project, Remakes, started out as the React router project, and then it grew into its own framework. So you can kind of see how clever they are in sort of working with the routes. It's really clever because that's pretty much where they came from. So that's why it looks like that. So I don't know. It's something, you know, what I always think too is by watching these episodes and by me trying these things out, it's just another tool in your toolbox that when you think about a project that needs something very specific, perhaps you have a lot of things that use data. I'm also enjoying how this is going to give me hooks into ways of retrieving data without having to use something else. I know data management is really big on React projects, so I think this gives me a way to just more simply connect to something like SQL or Postgres and other things that are a little bit, maybe not more difficult, but a little bit more cumbersome with React. So I'm pretty excited about it, but I haven't tried Hydrogen. You know, I haven't tried other things, and I've seen a lot of other projects that are just as interesting. So I think maybe ask me at the end of the year, which one do I think is going to be is the best? But honestly, there's no such thing as the best of anything. I think there are levels, and also that there's just tools in your toolbox. And sometimes you want something like Alpine.js that is like a super quick thing, just load things directly from the client side. Sometimes you want to go to React. Sometimes, you know, Pico CSS, what a cool little framework, but for demos, it's fantastic because notice I don't spend a lot of time adding classes. Just imagine if I was doing a demo and I was using, Tailwind CSS 3, my class names would be like, you know, way humongous. So I like the simplicity of that. And that's just, I find myself reusing things that I've covered in previous episodes just because they're so awesome. And those are tools that I didn't have in my toolbox before. So it's kind of the same thing that I'm trying to do for you as well. So that's all that I have this week. I don't really see any more questions in the chat. Thanks for coming in. I did a really short intro. Hopefully, let me know if you like that. I kind of missed the old intro because it allowed me a little bit of calm before the storm. I'm debating whether I should have like the slightly longer intro and then just edit it down on YouTube so that people don't complain about the long leading. I think people don't understand that these are live events, so they're different than videos, so they see them as videos. But we're going to try to keep on working with things and make the show better and better. So anyways, good talking to you, and hopefully I'll see you again next time. One more thing, I am going to be taking off a couple of weeks. I have to work on a Tailwind CSS 3 new course, and that's just going to wipe me out for the next couple of weeks. So expect an episode after that. So in like 3 weeks, I'll see you around on the next episode which will be episode 23 of 22 of the Toolbox. Talk to you later.